Enjoy the show! Visceral, immersive, and daunting. Just three of the words I would use to describe Blasphemous 2, a sequel to a dark and gritty metroidvania full of both fun and religious undertones. Just before the original game came out in 2019, many including me hyped it up to be a game that could not only compete with the best, but also fill the hole that Silksong left. And while Blasphemous 1 was anything but polished and full of content during its initial release, similar to Hollow Knight through iterations of DLC released after and after, began to flesh out not only what it could offer, but also its own charm. The original was great in its own right, while not totally true to the 2D Metroidvanias that inspired it, had left a great impression over both its setting and the grim and dark world that it takes place in. A tale clearly inspired by the religious fanaticism of medieval Europe, combined with the pixel art aesthetics of the 1970s. But a game is a game. And to me especially, there's no truer statement than gameplay above all. And while I did thoroughly enjoy Blasphemous 1, I felt a bit bittersweet in its design, and wanted something that invoked the more traditional gameplay formula of platforming with lock and keys that the other Metroidvanias had offered. And after binging the game, while flawed just like any other, had really lived up to the same expectation I had going into the first. A rewarding pilgrimage into a world full of intrigue. And looking back, it clearly is a game that I would recommend to anybody a fan of Metroidvanias to play. There's a lot to cover about this game, and I wanted to talk about my own thoughts about it. So this is my experience with Blasphemous 2. In the dark and twisted world of Blasphemous 2, we are once again invited back to Custodia, a highly religious and gothic land based in the real-world province of Andalusia in modern-day Spain. This sequel to the critically acclaimed Blasphemous retains the brutal challenge and the rich gothic atmosphere found in the original. Developed by the Game Kitchen, Blasphemous 2 expands on its predecessor by refining the gameplay mechanics, expanding the cryptic and intriguing story, and showcasing even more grotesquely captivating visuals. And without any major spoilers, we once again follow the Penitent one, a silent knight on a quest to uncover the mysterious curse and the abominations plaguing Custodia. Gameplay-wise, Blasphemous 2 is best described as a more fleshed out and refined version of its predecessor, remaining just as challenging as it was originally. A lot of the common elements are found in the original, such as prayers and beads that make their way back into the sequel. And it features the same Dark Souls styles gameplay of bonfires and soul retrieval found in the series, and honestly even a bunch of other Metroidvania games. The biggest difference compared to the original is the introduction of new weapons and the altar piece system. In the original we were treated to using Mea Cupola as our one and only primary weapon, and in Blasphemous 3 we are treated with 3. Ruego el Alba, a balanced one-hand sword most similar to the original weapon, Verdictio, a slow but hard-hitting giant flail, and my favorite, Sarimento and Cantella, a rapier and dagger used for quick strikes and rapid movements, each with its own complete skill tree and distinct playstyle that adds a lot of variety to the game, seeing as it is your main weapon. The game also features a new altar piece system, which similar to beads are a collection of carved statues placed on the penitent one's back, giving you passive bonuses, with some ranging from simple damage multipliers to enabling health regeneration. As an action platformer, and a Metroidvania in particular, the game retains the same fast-paced combat while enhancing it with a new set of movement controls combined with some new movement skills. I think what makes Blasphemous 2 stand out is that it features a more generic lock and key formula with movement skills that are more common among the other Metroidvanias. With a large, open, and interconnected map for you to explore, there's a lot of backtracking available. The combat formula remains the same, with a mix of prayers and some good old-fashioned melee combat with 3 distinct styles to choose from based on which weapon you're currently using. And visually this game remains very similar, with beautifully detailed pixel art that enhances the grim atmosphere. The art direction draws heavily from Spanish religious themes, creating a unique aesthetic that distinguishes from other titles in the genre. I really enjoyed this game, and especially after having played the original, made it so much more worthwhile. I think it's built on the foundations of something great, and delivers a visually stunning and significantly more polished game for the fans of the original, and is one of the top Metroidvanias I've ever played. Gameplay wise, this is a big step up from the original, and while the original was fun at times, it didn't nearly have as much depth as the sequel. In particular, a lot of the prayer mechanics and the lack of movement skills in the original made the game so much slower than it would ought to be. I think if there's one sentence that sums up the difference between the first and the second game, is that the second one has a lot more emphasis on movement. With traditional skills such as dashing and double jumping being present and unlockable throughout the game, you get a lot more fluid movement to this game compared to the first. And I think there's no bigger difference than when it comes to traversing the map. These movement skills, combined with the weapons and the new ledge holding mechanic, made it feel very polished. And it made backtracking, one of the most fundamental parts of any good Metroidvania, feel really rewarding. In that it always felt like there was at least one part of the map you remember that you should go back to after unlocking a new skill. Speaking of movement skills, you can't really have a game with only movement skills if there's no map to move through, and I think the level design and the platforming has gotten a lot better compared to the first. One of the most disappointing aspects of playing the original for me was the lack of any good platforming segments, or really any platforming segments at all. And I think this is in direct contrast to the second, where it closely resembles a more traditional 2D metroidvania. So think games like Hollow Knight or Ori and the Blind Forest. I would go so far as to even say that some of my favorite levels in this game are the ones revolving platforming. And to me, it shows just how well the levels are designed with the movement skills in mind, with a good combination of being not too punishing, rewarding to complete, and smooth control. For the most part at least. And yes, I get it. Double jump and dashing isn't really new, and it's really up to the more unique aspects to make it fun. And while I really like the weapon's unique platforming abilities, in particular both the rapier and the broadsword, I felt like the swapping in between always felt super clunky. You wouldn't imagine the amount of times where I perfectly completed a segment prior to a final dive, only to have missed the weapon swap by a quarter second and having to restart again. Such great concepts in my opinion that only needed a slight change as to how they were used. And while it wasn't particularly hard, as most of the time it only took 1 or 2 tries after, it did sour my mood as to how they were used in the game. Still though, I really couldn't enjoy enough of the platforming in this game. And to my surprise, by the end of this game, there wasn't any extra areas dedicated to just this, unlike games such as Hollow Knight's White Castle or Aeterna Noctis' individual platforming challenges. There was a lot missing from a game with such good platforming mechanics, and it was sad to see that there wasn't any areas designed with this in mind, with the exception of a side quest that had the right idea in mind, but was too little and more importantly, far too easy. The platforming was still one of the biggest highlights for me in this game. And on a bigger scale than the levels, at the core of every Metroidvania game is of course, its map. And the one featured here is not only big, but also gorgeous, with some good set pieces returning such as the Gothic churches, and some new ones, such as Atlantis and an inverted castle. But more than just looks aside, part of what sets this game's map apart as from others is how the 3 weapons you pick at the start really tie into the progression of the game. Remember that at the start of your run, you get to pick from one of the 3 weapons available to you, each with their own unlockable movement mechanics: the rapier with its teleportation, the flail with its invisible platform and doors, and the sword with its slam. Ordinarily, these skills will be unlocked as you progress through the game, but in Blasphemous, you're not only able to select the one that you start off with, but also the first 3 objectives you get are based off collecting the other 2, which makes it so that every playthrough feels different each time. Want to start off with the rapier and the ability to teleport while getting the mace first? No problem. Want to learn how to dive and get the rapier next? You got it. And it ties into the bigger theme of this non-linear exploration and the idea of the lock and key gameplay that makes each map in this genre so fun to explore. The concept of seeing the giant city fall from the sky and seeing the weight of each of your actions as you progress through the story, and just the general cutscenes in general from the game whenever a new area unlocks makes the world feel so alive. And I want to take note that for the majority of this game, going through and exploring the map while backtracking felt really fluid, and there was always some new area or something interesting that you just had to see. And it's such a shame that towards the end, exploration started to become so linear, with each objective unlocking one by one, and there really only being one path forward. Sure, there were still backtracking parts that you could go through with your newfound skills, which while still good, didn't have the same appeal as before, and it made the map feel a lot less connected than what it otherwise should have been. On top of that, it doesn't help that the final area of the map is really nothing but a giant hue of red, with not much connectivity or really any content to explore, which when all put together, left me with such a bittersweet aftertaste since I really felt like this game had such a strong start only to run out of steam towards the end. So half of all Metroidvania games is the exploration, but how good is the combat? And to me, I was overall pretty happy with the combat mechanics that retained much of what the original had, while also being more fleshed out. Most of the attacks in this game are parryable, and especially against bosses, getting the timing right against the big attack, only to then follow it up with a big chunk of the damage is one of the most satisfying parts of playing this game. It also helps that the prayer system in this game, which functions as spells, also makes a return. So I was really glad that not only did they do a great job in expanding the number of prayers available, but they also made the types of prayers available significantly better than before. By all means, builds focusing exclusively on prayer are still here, but I think the saving grace is that builds that are now focused on melee now have useful prayers outside of just damage. Abilities such as stopping time, negating all damage, or even summoning familiars makes it so much more useful rather than something you can just forget. And with prayers being split between the slower and more powerful chants and the instant quick verses, they added so much QOL to their usability. Although the fact that you can pick whichever prayers you can use outside the rest areas, but for some reason only through the pause menu, is still completely jarring. And it makes you wonder whether they were meant to be swappable at all in the first place. For builds, the beads are making their way back in, but with a more fitting altar piece system being added in as well. There really isn't that much to say about this. They're both just things that you can equip that grant passive stats so you can customize your builds. Although the theming of the altar piece system felt so much more fitting in the context of such a heavily religious world. Each of the 3 weapons themselves also have a distinct playstyle as well. The mace does the most damage and features a massive range but no ability to parry, and it can also consume mana to make each swing do more damage, which makes it the worst to pair up with prayers. The sword allows the use to parry and has the ability to consume HP to make each attack lifesteal and deal more damage. And it's by far the best weapon to use in air since each successive attack resets your downward momentum, which is really important against bosses or mobs that don't like to come down. The rapier is focused on quick strikes and has the shortest range, and it features the ability to lunge and to be empowered by lightning after a charge up, although you do lose this the moment you're hit. I use this the most throughout my run, since I found the playstyle of dealing the most damage if you can avoid getting hit to be super rewarding. So when you add all the mechanics together, you really get a good grasp of just how different each playthrough can be. And I found that despite the original having a new Game Plus feature and this one not having one, this game is the one that would have benefited the most from it, since I would have loved to have a chance of playing through a second run while maintaining my existing gear with a new weapon. I think I've said enough about the combat mechanics themselves, with the mobs in this game being nothing out of the ordinary. However, the bosses in this game are pretty good, and aside from the 1 or 2 special attacks, they do a really good job in rewarding the player for memorizing the patterns. The elevator sequence was probably my favorite because of just how well it is gameplay wise, combined with the overall aesthetics. Though I think I'm just a sucker for any set piece that's moving though. The story in the second game does feel less integrated with the game, and the art direction of it is more lively and less focused on portraying the more gore and grotesque nature of its religious setting. And I think you can see this pretty clearly when I put the 2 games side by side, with the color palette of the game being noticeably different. And I think fans of Blasphemous 1, especially the more diehard ones, I think this will be a step down from the original. But I'll be a bit controversial in saying that I really enjoyed the look over this compared to the original, in that the first game's muted color scheme always seemed less inspired than what we currently have. It's still a super fun metroidvania that has great mechanics. It's fluid to play, has a big map to explore, visually looks great, and has a unique story to go along with it. So it's definitely worth checking out. And similarly, much like the first, might be followed up with some DLC that will really push it to be one of the best games out there, akin to Hollow Knight and the original, which were added onto greatly by the free DLCs that came right after. Despite the critiques, I still hold a deep appreciation for what Blasphemous 2 offers, and it's one of those games that's gonna be on my replay list. So I want to do a shout out to the developers that constantly strive to improve and address the comments. As to me, it felt like that most of the polish of what this game offers is aimed at addressing some of the comments and complaints on the first, be it the combat or the platforming. And I hope that in the near future with more support, this game will finally get the last bit of love it needs to be a truly great title. So as always, thanks for watching, until next time.